Hello and welcome to a Netrunner matchup between Shaper Kate and HB Engineering the Future. This is a Cyber Exodus matchup, so we should get to see some of the newer cards here. The Shaper player is just drawing into the cards and they're about ready to start. You could see mandatory upgrades in his hand: Hedge Fund, Victor, an Adonis campaign, and a couple ice. Wall of Static, looks like an Ichi. It's not a bad starting hand at all. Goes for money first. Money is always a good thing. It's a really interesting starting hand because he can really protect. He can make a choice to protect everything because he has the Victor and the Wall of Static, or he can play it and try and get that Mangiar upgrades out fast. But he goes the protect everything route, which is a good route to go. Throws it over the Shaper. We'll see if the Shaper plays aggressive. Oh, probably not with a Magnus Opus in hand. Sees a sure gamble, drops it for the 4 credits. Always a good thing to have more money. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Magnum Opus come out very quick. He ran as a second action. Interesting. That can be tough against a Neural Katana. Ooh, ran with 2 actions. That can be tough running early because you might get Neural Katana to lose cards, but they have to actually choose to play it. So Neural Katana, I always tell people, is more effective out of non-Jinteki than it is out of Jinteki for that reason. Looks like he's probably going to install the private contracts. It's an interesting card over Hedge Fund. Obviously he has both, so I guess it's not really played over a Hedge Fund, but if you don't have access to, say, a marked accounts or something, you can throw in a private contracts to be another credit steroid, which is really nice. Costs 5 to trash. They have to run it. It works in your favor if you need a lot of credits. So he's still sitting on the Magnum Opus, has a Diesel. I could see him using the Magnum Opus. Oh, no, he runs the private contracts, sees it. Let's see if he trashes it. It's one of those things where it's really expensive, but sometimes when you waste your action, you've already basically invested a credit, it's better to trash it, otherwise it winds up costing you an additional credit, though you can drain the corp of some money. So it's always a questionable action to just do that. Now that's a nice Diesel. Getting a sure gamble will drop him down to the 5 cards, so pretty much he can draw another card, play a Magnum Opus, and he has a ton of credits effectively off of that Diesel. There you'll notice he didn't take any credits because he dropped in the Magnum Opus for 4 using Kate's ability. Couldn't see if he drew into anything. He does res the private contracts. I mean, he obviously drew a card, but all I saw was a mandatory upgrade, so I don't know if he drew another one. We will see when he looks at his hand. And so here you can see the power of private contracts. He doesn't have a full hand, so he can actually just choose to take 6 credits from it. And it looks like that's what he did. So this is where now you go back to the runner. As a runner, do you want to prevent him from getting those extra credits? Is it worth that investment of, in this case, 7 credits, because the running, there's an opportunity cost of 2. So he has to pay 7 credits to trash 6. It's a little bit of a dilemma, but it may not be a bad decision. Draws into the mem chip, which is always nice when you have Magnum Opus because you always need memory. Drops into play, and it looks like he is going to trash the rest of his credits. It's a good move. You don't want the corp to have money, especially HB. Giannis is pretty scary. Heimdall can be scary. Well, Heimdall can be scary in combination with Ichi. Like, you put the Heimdall out in front, and then the Ichi sits behind it, and the runner can't just run blindly into the Ichi without a way to break it. I mean, it doesn't matter if the next card after Heimdall is an Ichi. They just can't run blindly into unresed ice with no actions. So this isn't a particularly strong position for the corp, but the runner currently has no breakers on the board. So this is one of those decisions where you kind of have to choose: do you sit there and play passively? The runner runs on the remote, hits the Enigma, loses a credit. So you have to question: is it a good move to play passively here? He's playing somewhat passively, letting the runner come to him and trying to burn the runner's credits before he tries to score an agenda. Here he reses the Adonis to, again, accelerate him. An aggressive move here would be to drop in the mandatory upgrades and start advancing it. You might do that if you think the runner isn't running, say, an inside job. You think they don't have a Crypsis, you think they don't have a Code Gate Breaker. But again, that's a very aggressive move. It would work if he had an Ash to go with it, because then the Ash kind of backs up the aggression. You know, you put the runner in position, they pay a bunch of credits, then they get hit with Ash. He doesn't have the Ash right now, so he's going to slow play it, which is probably the right decision. Drops in the rotor turret, drops something behind it. Now that's a nice little tricky move. In the event that the runner doesn't draw into a sentry, or sorry, a sentry breaker like Pipeline or Crypsis, if he decides to run there, the rotor turret can blow up, say, his Code Gate breaker if he installs one, or his Magnum Opus. So it's always fun to do that, and I'm sure he's debating exactly that. He's trying to figure out, is that the rotor turret? Do I let him blow up the Magnum Opus? He knows he has another one in hand, so it may actually benefit him here. You kind of have to guess he runs test runs, so even if he blows through 2 Magnum Opuses, he should be able to get one back. So it's not a terrible move here. It'll cost the Corp 4 credits, so we'll see what he does. Drops in the Gordian Blade. Looks like he wants to blow up that Adonis campaign. Again, keeping the... Ooh, he runs the remote. Interesting. So here comes the rotor turret. We'll see what he blows up. He chooses Magnum Opus. Not terribly surprised, but if I were in that position, I might have actually chosen the Gordian Blade, simply because you have a limited amount of icebreakers. Magnum Opus is a great card, but now you give him 2 MU back. It's interesting. He could, if he blew up the Gordian Blade, he would know he might have a turn or two where he could try and pass an agenda. It might have benefited him to... See, he loses his Adonis campaign simply because he didn't trash the Gordian Blade. So you can see the immediate effects of it right there. On the flip side, he could throw something behind the rotor turret right now and probably score it, because we saw that the runner doesn't really have a sentry breaker. He doesn't run the Adonis campaign, passes back, just takes some credits. It's good to do that because the runner has to assume that could be Ash. They have to play with that in mind, and it isn't an Ash, so when he hits it, it's just going to be a little bit sadder. So here, he really needs a sentry breaker right now. He doesn't really need to attack HQ, though it might be beneficial, because it's usually beneficial at least to hit HQ hard once during the game. And when I say hard, I mean hit it 4 times in a row or 3 times in a row, because that'll generally get you a 50% chance of hitting an agenda if they have one in the hand. But he's not in a position to do that, doesn't have the breaker, so he's just kind of got to draw into some breakers here. Res the Adonis campaign to grab money. Still a little surprised he's not installing the mandatory upgrades. Sorry, obviously, I take that back. Gordian Blade. Again, you can see how destroying the Gordian Blade would put him in a better position to destroy or score the mandatory upgrades. Passes back to the runner. Looks like the runner might have a snowball. Draws into a Cyber Feeder. An interesting card. It's rarely a bad card because you're going to be running a lot, but it can slow down your rig. You know, the size of your rig does make a difference. The bigger your rig is, the more expensive your rig is to get up, the slower your deck is going to play. Corp draws into an Amazon Industrial Zone. Now that'll be interesting. I don't know if this deck is going to be played out as a res a bunch of ice deck. You know, you assume that they're going to, and yeah, it looks like he's actually going to start dropping stuff. Drops in the Neural Katana. So he paid 4 to res the Industrial Zone, paid 1, 2, 3 for the Katana, and now he can basically just keep dropping stuff in there. Drops in a card. I didn't see if it was an agenda, but at this point, you would think it was. He has a decent number of credits, and Neural Katana is just really annoying. So now, the runner really has to think about... There's a couple of considerations. One, he literally could just run straight through the Neural Katana if he really thought it was something worth scoring. That's one of the disadvantages of Neural Katana. While it's scary, you can also just run through it and take damage. Instead, he drops in a Crypsis. Always a good card. Not always a good ice, not always a good breaker, but it's usually a good card. So that will allow him to break the Neural Katana, break the Enigma, and break anything else. But he has to get the credits to do it, and he has to charge it. So this is where there's now pressure on the Corp. He knows he has the mandatory upgrades there, unadvanced. But the Crypsis is just... it's at a point where if he starts advancing it, there's a chance that the runner is just going to choose to pop a couple of tokens on Crypsis and then run the server. This is why when you have mandatory upgrades, trap cards can be pretty significant. Trap cards have gotten a lot better, both advanceable traps and non-advanceable traps. I've seen a lot of Edge of World played out of HB lately, because in this situation, if he doesn't advance it, the runner has to assume it could be an Edge of World. It's not a ton of influence to play Edge of World. The Katana would hit him for 3 damage, and then he'd take 3 brain damage from the Edge of World if he just ran it flat out right now. He has no way to protect against it, because the only thing that protects against brain damage is really the Public Sympathy card. Corp drops in a Victor. Another Code Gate. Not sure that's a great move because he's already got the Gordian Blade, but it's not a bad move. Costs him another 2 credits to break it, or 2 actions. And that Victor cost him all of 3 credits. So there is where you start to see the power of Amazon Industrial Grid. It stacks up. It stacks up very quickly. People have been playing a lot of cheap ice to go with it, I've been seeing. Like, you'll see a lot of those are 3 and 4. I'm not sure that's the best way to play it, but it's certainly an efficient way to play it, as you're just going to be able to drop ice basically for the cost of what position it's going into. So it's back to the runner. He sees the advancement token. Your question is always, is that a June bug? Is that an aggressive secretary? Aggressive secretary is always devastating. And at this point, he's already lost 1 magnum opus. Losing a second magnum opus could be very game altering. So this is why in almost every deck now, 3 copies of Infiltrate is worth it. You hope you draw into one. You save it for when this happens so that you can see if it's an Edge of World, see if it's an agenda. He drops the Diesel, sees a toolbox, a modded, and another toolbox. Card redundancy is always interesting. It increases your odds of drawing it, but also increases your odds of doing exactly that, getting 2 toolboxes. A modded here into something would speed him up because he is nearly full. Drops in Cyber Feeder for 1. He discarded a toolbox. It's not a bad move. I'm just a little surprised because he could have just played the modded and the toolbox, and he wouldn't have had to discard any cards. I know I prefer to not discard cards, but that's just personal preference. So it looks like the HP player drew into an Executive Retreat. He has 1 advancement token on the mandatory upgrades. Advances it again. We'll see what he does. I wouldn't be surprised. There it is, to 4. That'll give him... Ironically, he doesn't need the extra action because when he scores it, he immediately gets the additional action. So this will give him 2 actions if he's able to score it. Or he'll have 2 actions remaining after scoring it next turn. So here the runner has about 7 credits for running. He doesn't know what the unresed ice is. Draws into a Gordian Blade. So if that unresed ice is currently a barrier, he's going to have to charge Crypsis, which he hasn't yet done. Draws again and gets a test run, so he could go for a battering ram right now, but he doesn't have the MU for it. He could go for a snowball if he runs it, but I'd be surprised to see him. In comes the toolbox, he passes it back. And now you really don't want HP scoring mandatory upgrades. It won't lose you the game, but it becomes very powerful very quickly. So you see he spends his 2 credits to score the mandatory upgrades, and now he has 2 remaining actions. He doesn't have a ton of credits, so his best move here may just be... Ooh, he drops in the Executive Retreat. I was going to say his best move may just be to sit on his cards and take credits, but it's not a bad move to put the Executive Retreat in, because now he can't just run the Wall of Static and drop it out of his hand. So it's really what risk do you want to take? What's the reward? The risk of keeping it in your hand is that obviously it gets pulled, but the reward is that it's very inefficient for the runner to find it. But in this case, it will be more expensive for the runner to jump down the big wall of ice, especially with Ash in the back, though he currently has a 3-link. So the runner installs a battering ram. He does have the MU for it right now, and passes back to the Corp. Corp, again, is somewhat light on credits here, but he has 4 actions, which means if he wanted to, it looked like he drew into either Vitruvius or a beta test, he could install and score. Because with 2 credits, you install it, get a credit, and then 1, 2, 3 to score it. I don't think he'll do it because he won't be able to res the Ash, and the runner is in a position to run the server right now because Magnum Opus takes a bunch of credits. He has the 2 from Toolbox and the 1 from Cyberfeeder, so he should be able to get in here. And you do want to use the Ash because the runners likely not really have any credits left at the end of the run because that server is not exactly as small. But at the same time, if that was a beta test, he could put big ice on it. If it was Vitruvius, there's really no reason to score. It doesn't benefit him. So he passes it back to the runner after advancing once. He did take a few credits, so he's probably has enough money to res that. Wow, the runner just took 8 credits. Very interesting. So this is where he has 4 actions. Scoring the executive retreat is the right decision. It's going to clear his hand, which, you know, there weren't really any great cards in it. Shuffle it back into his deck, and it's going to give him an opportunity to really slow play hard. He's in a position where right now the only way the runner is really going to win this game without being aggressive on that remote is to start running R&D. And as I said, he drops in a medium. That's somewhat funny. The Corp can't res the first ice. Didn't see if he broke the Victor. He most likely did break the Victor. That's 1 token for medium, and he saw an ice, so he doesn't score anything. Runs it again. Again, it's only cost about 3 credits. He's going to see 2 cards here, and this is where medium can really start to put pressure on the Corp. Runs it again. So he's going to see 3 cards here. Looks like there's an agenda there. Nope. It's an Ash or something. So this is where medium puts a lot of pressure, especially out of Shaper. You just have a ton of credits. You can see the Corp didn't put a ton of ice on R&D. So he really can't do anything about medium except try to res the ice in front. Based on his early hand, I think that's either an Ichi or a Heimdall. But I'm sure we'll find out right now. So there's the Ichi. He can click through it or break it with Crypsis. Unfortunately, he does have a counter on Crypsis. So it costs 7 to break it with Crypsis. He can also let the tag run because that's one of the advantages of having a bunch of Link out of Shaper. A Trace 1 attempt is not really a big deal. So there you see the medium is now going to get 4. And this is where you really have to start clearing. Because if you don't start clearing, he's going to do just that. You have a ton of cards to draw through. He's seeing 4 cards down, so it's going to be if he didn't get that agenda, it still would have been 3 turns till he got there. You just can't let, and there you can actually see he cleared and had 1 action remaining from mandatory upgrades. It was a good choice to clear. The Shaper still has a bunch of time to take credits because he knows what the next 2 cards are going to be. But it at least slows him down from scoring half of his deck. Draws into an Infiltrate. Not huge right now. That doesn't make a huge difference because he doesn't have to worry about Edge of World or anything. He knows what the Corp is going to draw into. But if the Corp does ever get down to a card that he doesn't know, he's going to be able to now use the Infiltrate. Here the Corp takes some credits, plays a hedge fund, so he's getting his economy back and going. That's a good thing because he does need to get some ice out on R&D. It's very lightly defended, and medium can just blow through it. Now, Ichi is a tough ice, but if the runner wants to, he can run R&D, click through Ichi, and then pay just the 3 recursive credits to break through the Victor. So he could, if he wanted to, run on R&D every turn right now. That's one of the advantages of, or one of the disadvantages of lightly protecting R&D against recurring credits. The runner can dictate what you're drawing, and you don't want that because you're not going to draw an agenda for the rest of the game in that case. So here you'll see him drawing 5 cards because he activated the Executive Retreat. He still has 3 actions left because of mandatory upgrades, and mandatory upgrades is just one of those cards that it slowly makes a difference. The current score is 5-2, and with all those cards and a lot of credits right now, it would seem, and a bunch of ice, wow. It would seem that the game is starting to really play out in his favor. Drops an ice on R&D. This is not particularly expensive. seeing as he has so many actions to take credits. We'll see if he keeps playing Ice. I think I would drop the Troubleshooter somewhere goofy, like behind the Rototurret, just so that it is in the game with some impact and I don't have to discard a card. But that's not necessarily the best move. He could just take credits. He doesn't need to play all of that Ice, so he may just choose to take credits and discard some of that Ice. And you can see it's not particularly big Ice. It's like a Neural Katana, Wall of Static, and Enigma. So this is the weak side of playing a bunch of cheap Ice to go with Amazon Industrial Zone. You're playing a bunch of cheap Ice. So against, for example, Shaper, this is a bad matchup because you can't stack the same Ice multiple times. Shaper just kind of smashes right through it. Even Anarch can smash right through it relatively cheaply. Wall of Static's not a particularly big wall. Enigma is obviously, Yogg runs right through it, so it's tough. Infiltrates what the Corp installed. Good move. You want to know if it's an agenda. You want to know if it was, obviously, Corporate Troubleshooter. He now knows it's Corporate Troubleshooter, so he has to worry about that unresed Ice being a Rototurret. He's going to run HQ. I assume he thinks that he got something. That's a very good I want to say it's a good move. In this case, because he had the Infiltrate, it is a good move. He dropped in the Corporate Troubleshooter. You would think if it was an agenda, he would have kept it in hand. If he had an agenda, it would still be in his hand. I'm surprised he didn't chain run HQ. Ooh, another mandatory upgrades. That's very interesting. So it's basically, there's a time limit on this game now. It's going to take a couple of Corp turns for him to win. But the Shaper does currently have enough credits to get in. It may be in his best interest to take credits here and try and burn all of the Shaper's credits trying to break, say, a Rototurret or the Neural Katana. But Crypsis is just such a strong card with Magnum Opus against Corporate Troubleshooter that he really needs something else to back it up. Now, one of the things he can do here is stack sentries, because you'll notice the Shaper isn't running a pipeline. So if he stacks sentry breakers, and there goes the Neural Katana, ironically that costs only 5, because Amazon Industrial Zone just hasn't gone away, he hasn't played another region or anything. So he installs that, advances once, kind of telegraphing that it could be an agenda, putting the Shaper in a spot where he has to either run and get blown up by an aggressive secretary, or not run and risk him winning the game. So he is in the position to win the game if that doesn't get run. He did have to blow, I want to say he had to blow the Infiltrate to find out if that was, say, a private security force or something. But that would be somewhat of an odd choice in a mandatory upgrades deck, so infiltrating that may have not been the best choice. You would guess a mandatory upgrades deck isn't going to run private security force because once they get that one mandatory upgrade scored, they're just going to try and instant score an Accelerator Beta Test or a Vitruvius. So an unres card is unlikely to be an agenda. He might have spent the click that turn, getting him the 5 cards, so that would be could be the reason that he infiltrated it. So he drops the test run. Out comes Femme Fatale. He currently has 8 MU and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So he does have the space for that. I'm going to guess he's going to use it on the unres card. Not much of a surprise. He doesn't have to worry about that right now. Out comes, looks like experiential data, actually. Ouch. So that's going to cost him a total of 5 for Femme to get her up to 4 and break. Then he goes on to the Victor. He can either click through it or break it with Gordian Blade. Looks like he's breaking it with Gordian Blade, which costs him a total of 4 right now because of the experiential data. That was a nice move. I really like experiential data because now it makes all that cheap ice much scarier. So he was just pointing to the Gordian Blade to make sure that the runner kept the strength up for the rest of the run. Not that it will matter, but depends on if that's a toll booth or something. So he hits the next Neural Katana. That will again cost 5 to break. It looks like, based on the Shaper's current setup, that he might not be able to score the agenda if he does get in. So he may be considering jacking out here rather than wasting time. He doesn't know what the unres card is. I don't know. It's interesting. The 5 he'll spend here, so basically what it comes down to is he's spending 5 to break the Neural Katana. Then he hits the ice. The number of subroutines on that ice are going to dictate whether or not he can score the agenda, assuming that the face-down card isn't an Ash. If the face-down card is an Ash, if he spends all of his credits, it's useless. Now he's in a position where you know that they don't have, or HB doesn't have any one-point agendas. So if that is an agenda, game is over. So he has to try and blow it up. He has to do everything he can, or he loses the game here. And you'll see he did in fact pay the 5. Here comes the ice. We'll see how many subroutines it has, because it's femme fatale right now. 1 massive subroutine, so he's going to be able to pay the 1 to break it. He already has the credits from Gordian Blade. The strength of Gordian Blade. So Gordian Blade's strength 4 to Enigma's 3. He can either pay 2 and break both subroutines, or pay 1 and break just the end the run here. That might be in his best interest, as he has 1 click left, and he very well may need the money to score that if it's an agenda. So I would guess he's going to pay 1 and only break the end run. And that last card is an Ash. But in this case, because the Corp doesn't have a ton of money, he does not have the money to res the Ash and score mandatory upgrades next turn. So while this run put him in a position to... maybe that's not an Ash. So that was a good run for the runner, obviously. And now he's looking at cards to see if he wants to trash anything. If he doesn't trash the experiential data, it's just going to bite him in... Yep, there it goes. So that was a good run for the runner. A lot of money. Unfortunately, didn't see what that card was. So now it's back to the Corp. Now, while he did give the runner 2 points, it cost the runner a ton of money to get it. So even though he gave up 2 points, it might have actually worked in his favor. If he had another agenda in his hand, it definitely would have worked in his favor, because he would have installed the agenda, and the runner's, SOL. He has no credits. Even if he takes 8 credits from Magnum Opus, he can't get back into the server. So, unfortunately, he didn't have the agenda to follow it up. So, giving away that mandatory upgrades could be a negative here. The runner also still has medium in play, but R&D is pretty iced up. It would not be in his best interest to run over there right now. Runner takes 8 credits, goes back to Corp. Corp draws into an Adon's campaign. That's very nice for him. He does need credits right now. Even though he has the Amazon there, it's going to be pretty expensive for him to keep installing ice there. And he really has to install only sentries, so his only options are Ichi and Neural Katana. He could drop a Rototard there too, but the Femme Fatale will just eat that alive, obviously. He does have a Neural Katana in his hand, which would be nice. If he can get another experiential data in there, it'd be nice. I didn't see if that was the card he installed. He has another Amazon. It might help to drop it on R&D, but at this point, it's relatively unnecessary. And then the wall is static. It'll cost 2 to break it with Battering Ram, which is not a bad thing. That's one of the weaknesses of Battering Ram. There's only a couple cards where it's inefficient against. Battering Ram's still equal to Corroder against Wall of Static if the Corroder isn't buffed, because it costs them both 2. But 2's not insignificant. Looks like he runs R&D here. Ooh, a double Ichi. So he has to break this. I don't know if he's going to break with Crypsis or choose to click through it. I don't like losing Crypsis because it's just such a nice catch-all card. It saves you from anything bad. So yeah, there he goes. Huh. It looks like he may actually be paying to break it with Crypsis, and that will blow up Crypsis if he doesn't have a token on it. I'm not exactly sure what just played out. We're about to find out, I think. Yep, there goes the Crypsis, so he did break it with Crypsis. Interesting move. That's what happens when you run on your last action. You get hit with Ichi, and it hurts really bad. That was his best option. It was either pay 7 credits and lose Crypsis, or don't pay 7 credits and the Corp chooses what programs you lose. So that is the danger of running on your last action. At this point, He doesn't have a ton of credits, but the Corp doesn't have an agenda, and he can kind of get into any server. So the Corp's really hoping for an agenda for this off of this next card. He reses the Adonis campaign, costing him a net of 1, or a total of 1. Good move for him. He does need the credits. Draws into an Ice Wall. Not going to be a ton of help here. He really doesn't have anywhere to play that. Ooh, draws into an agenda. And that's the disadvantage of using your draw sometimes. You draw into something and aren't able to fully utilize it. Had he just waited a turn, he would have drawn into that and instant scored it because of mandatory upgrades. So now the runner does have to run, and he doesn't exactly have the credits to get there, though he is likely able to get them just because Magnum Opus is so powerful. He no longer has a Sentry Breaker, though. So this is an interesting position. The runner can, if he wants to, draw 1 card. I believe he has 5 cards in his hand. Eat the 6 damage from the Neural Katanas, and run the risk of being killed by Edge of World. But it's just an option he has. He doesn't necessarily need to get all of the credits. He can just run, take a bunch of credits, and get hit in the face with Neural Katanas. He unfortunately didn't have 5 cards in his hand, so that wasn't an option. He draws into a Mem Chip and the Femme Fatale. He needs the Femme Fatale in play right now, but it's too expensive for him to be able to run that server. So he's just going to take credits, and that's the game. Very interesting game here. The early mandatory upgrades obviously was huge. The run on that server, mid-game to score the mandatory